In the next scene, the fake couple is caught by Chun Myung and Soo Jong together, which means Se-jin and Junha must now hope that the gossipers don't spread the news about them. After all, an office romance won't please Chon-sik and could hinder their plans to separate Taekyung and the protagonist. Meanwhile, at Bongnim's restaurant, Dae-sang brings his girlfriend to apologize to his sister for leaving the job without any notice. To make amends, Woo-hee agrees to a pay cut and begs Bongnim to keep her job. Later, we see Yoo Myung during her shift, feeling anxious after discovering that her boss has set up a meeting with Dongwook. As we know, before having this superior-subordinate relationship, the two were friends, and the boss had confided in Yoo Myung about her interest in Dongwook. However, Yoo Myung, still confused about her own feelings, acts impulsively and intercepts Dongwook before he meets her boss, whisking him away, all under her boss's watchful eye. Now, the two of them are talking while receiving multiple calls from the boss who wants to know what's happening. Focusing on their conversation, Dongwook explains that he only agreed to meet Yoo Myung's boss to let her down gently. As we know, he doesn't intend to date anyone until Soo Jae-um is self-sufficient. At this moment, Yoo Myung musters the courage to express her feelings and confusion, stating that she would like to try something with him if he's open to it. Meanwhile, at the Gong household, Ji Myung begins to suspect that In-ok overheard Sang-hoon's declaration that day at the gate because the lady keeps pestering her not to stay away from Hyun-woo. In the next scene, we see Taekyung waking up in the middle of the night, noticing the protagonist is missing from their bed. He decides to look for her around the house and hears her talking in the office. Yeon-do, thinking she's alone, expresses her feelings to her baby. She knows Taekyung will be a great father, but she doesn't want to create that bond between him and the child, as their relationship is set to end in a few weeks, and Yeon-do doesn't want it to be more difficult than it already is. The next day, we start with Jang-ho's ex-wife visiting him at Bongnim's house. She brings lunch for the family and, while talking privately with Jang-ho, addresses two issues. First, she wants to cancel the divorce and asks him to return home. Secondly, she comments on Se-jin not being fired. At this point, Jang-ho mentions the anonymous letter he sent to Chon-sik regarding their daughter. He thought, like I did, that his ex-wife wouldn't approve of his actions, but surprisingly, she agrees that Se-jin needs to be stopped somehow. Meanwhile, Ji Myung calls the protagonist to her office at Gong Enterprises and questions Yeon-do if she heard Sang-hoon's declaration along with In-ok. Being straightforward, Yeon-do admits she did and advises Ji Myung to tell In-ok everything when she gets home, so the lie about their fake marriage doesn't drag on any longer. Exiting the company, Yeon-do encounters a heavy rainstorm, and since Junha is there with his vehicle, he offers her a ride. Although Yeon-do hesitates at first, she eventually agrees, considering the baby's well-being. Se-jin witnesses this moment, which later leads to an argument between them. Continuing with Yeon-do in the car, Junha mentions that after the project with Gong Enterprises ends, he plans to return to the United States with Se-jin, which somewhat relieves the protagonist. Upon arriving home, Yeon-do shares with In-ok the conversation she had with Ji Myung, and In-ok is surprised to realize Hyun-woo must know his wife is seeing another man. Speaking of him, in the next scene, we see Dr. Cha visiting the pharmacy to speak with Mrs. Han and let her down gently. He understands her feelings but can't start a new relationship while still in love with Ji Myung. Nevertheless, Hyun-woo agrees to remain friends with her son, and later, we see the three of them enjoying a day at the park. The little one becomes comfortable with Dr. Cha and, with his mother present, expresses his wish for Hyun-woo to be his father, just as In-ok arrives. She is furious upon witnessing this scene, and after reprimanding her son-in-law, who confesses the whole truth, she heads to Ji Myung's office and demands to see her there. Meanwhile, Se-jin argues with Junha about the scene she witnessed earlier and for catching him with gifts for the protagonist's baby. She makes it clear that he should not stray from their plan, or everything will fall apart. Returning to In-ok, when Ji Myung arrives at her office, she finds the lady sitting at her desk. In-ok makes it clear to her daughter-in-law that she must resign from the company, or In-ok will ensure Chansik proceeds with her dismissal since such secrets aren't tolerated within the Gong family. In the next scene, we see Taekyung waking up again without his beloved by his side, but today he decides to do things differently. When he finds Yeondu talking to the baby, Taekyung joins her. Moving on to Hyunwoo and Ji Myung, the two are talking to figure out how to resolve their situation. Taking advantage of the honesty prevailing at the moment, both confess they're not seeing other people and were only trying to make each other jealous. Regardless, the next day, things start to change. First, Yeondu convinces Madam Moon to take her and Taekyung out for lunch. Then we see Ji Myung treating In-ok as best as possible so she doesn't follow through with removing her from the company. Meanwhile, headlines about Taekyung's child not being his surface, and Sejin takes the issue to Chansik along with Junha. Initially, the president accuses the secretary of wrongdoing, as given how she's been acting, it wouldn't be surprising. However, to alleviate suspicion of Sejin, Junha reveals they're dating, suggesting it must be someone else. In the next scene, we switch to Yoo Myung, who risked getting fired after the scene with Dongwook. However, her friend reassures her that everything's fine and wishes her luck in their relationship. Later, we see the girl meeting Soo Jaeum, who called because she couldn't reach her uncle and grandmother. It turns out her father is very feverish, and the girl was desperate, not knowing what to do, so Yoo Myung decides to take care of them for a while. Back to the president, after reading that news, he decides to cancel all his appointments and heads to a bar to drink. Taking advantage of Chansik's vulnerability, Junha joined the chairman and started telling stories to make him suspicious of Yeondu. It seems to be working to some extent, as Chansik admits finding the beginning of his son's relationship with her strange. Meanwhile, Ji Myung can no longer endure the anxiety over her problem with In-ok, so she decides to kneel before her and tell the whole truth from the start. After doing so, they agree that In-ok will consider changing her mind about Ji Myung leaving the company, but she must not lie anymore. Later, the chairman arrives home with Junha, and after Taekyung puts Chansik to bed, Junha tells him about the headline regarding Yeondu's baby. As a result, the next day, Taekyung goes early to Chansik's office to tell the president the whole truth. Naturally, Chansik orders Taekyung to end his relationship with the protagonist, but the doctor refuses, stating he truly loves her now, adding that he will convince her not to leave him. In the next scene, we turn to Hyunwoo, who is going to see Ji Myung at the company when he ends up meeting Sang-hoon in the elevator, and the two men decide to have a conversation. Sang-hoon finally reveals the secret he and Ji Myung have been keeping. It turns out that the baby Dr. Cha accused his wife of removing was lost spontaneously, and to avoid hurting him, Ji Myung lied. So for a year, the man has been blaming her for something that was also a surprise to her, as she didn't even know she was pregnant, and Sang-hoon was the one there to support her. Later, we see Taekyung making a request to the protagonist. Taekyung opens his heart and says he wants to discover what fatherhood is alongside Yeondu. He didn't have his biological father present in his life and felt rejected by Chansik, but he wants things to be different for real. Thus, it seems the protagonist agrees to raise the baby with him. Meanwhile, Hyunwoo questions Ji Myung once more about her secret with Sang-hoon, and this time, she tells the whole truth, which is the story we heard earlier. But honestly, I don't understand what's up with the man, as Dr. Cha feels deeply offended that Ji Myung carried this pain alone and once again blames her for the end of their relationship, so again, Hyunwoo decides to take a break. Leaving Ji Myung, who is now pregnant with his child, devastated. And worst of all, in my sincere opinion, was that Dr. Cha went to cry his emotions in the arms of Mrs. Han. The next day, things don't get better. Yeondu finds Ji Myung nearly fainting and exhausted from all the stress of the previous night. The woman cries in front of her sister-in-law and comments that Hyunwoo has left. In the next scene, we move to Woo Hee, who invited Soo Jong to hang out, and during their outing, we see Soo-jong venting about the donation of special fluid, which has been difficult for the couple to find a man for. Now we see Yeon-do being called to Chon-sik's office. He shows the protagonist the headline, and after she begins to cry, he asks her to immediately end things with Taekyung since the doctor won't do it. Yeon-do left the president's office very distraught, and as Taekyung suspected the chairman might act, he was heading toward the company when he saw the protagonist nearly fainting on the sidewalk. Fortunately, Jun-ha, who had passed by her as he exited the building, was nearby and caught her before Yeon-do fell to the ground, but from her leg, we can see that the bleeding began. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share it to help me out. Until next time.